So it's the structure that sets the parameters of how things work. For example, cable news. Cable news has a certain kind of structure. It's cut up into very short segments. It needs to be punchy. It needs to be breaking news. It needs to be shocking. It needs to get eyeballs. It needs to appeal to millions of people. It needs to be mass market. It needs to appeal to advertisers like giant oil companies, military companies, aerospace companies, pharmaceutical companies, so that they could fund the large budgets of these news anchors and news shows and, maintain that whole infrastructure. That is the structure of cable news. And so when you're looking at cable news, what many people don't realize is that they're only seeing the filtered content that comes through that TV screen. They have no idea of the structure behind it and how that structure is warping, distorting, and biasing, filtering, polarizing the content that is coming through. This is true not only of Fox News, but of course, CNN, MSNBC, any of the cable news shows. So I'm not just picking on Fox News here. Now, of course, Fox News is particularly egregious at this, particularly shameless at it, because they're the least meta. Like, their whole business model is just feeding you exactly what your reptilian brain craves. And that's very problematic. It's basically an indoctrination machine. But, CNN, MSNBC, they also give you very biased perspectives on the world. For example, one of the biggest biases is not liberal or conservative, it's just shock value and breaking news stuff. So the important in-depth news that really needs to be covered, that's not covered on cable news. You don't get that there. What you get there is you get shocking stuff. Somebody died. Somebody killed somebody. Somebody raped somebody. Somebody was involved in some sort of heinous act. Somebody is a cannibal and somebody is this and that. Like, it's all this stuff that you see mostly on the news. And that can give you a very twisted, biased perspective of the world. Because, if you watch the news every day for 365 days, by the end of that period, you're going to have a very twisted and warped perspective of what goes on in the world. Because the news doesn't show you all the good stuff. The news doesn't show you, sometimes they do, but rarely. They don't show you all the people who were saved and benefited, all the people who had enlightenment experiences this year. They don't show you about all the humanitarian aid that was done and all the dogs and animals that were saved and all the kind acts that mankind has done. None of this is shown. What's shown is the cannibals, the rapists, the murderers, the war criminals, this sort of stuff. The scandalous politicians and the mass shooters. That's what's shown. Because that's the structure of it. But it takes a lot of experience in life before you start to realize that this is the structure of the news. When you're a kid and you're just watching the news, you have no idea about any of this. You just consume that news, and not just kids, but adults too, will just blindly consume that news. A lot of Fox viewers will just watch Fox News and nothing else. They never go meta. They never realize there's even a possibility of going meta. They have no idea that there is such a thing as structure. They haven't made this distinction between content and structure that we're making here in this episode. And so they really get hypnotized by the content. And that shapes their whole worldview and their sense of reality. It literally constructs their new reality. And then they think that that reality is actually what's true, when it's just content. See? You have to peek behind the curtain to really see what's going on. You can't just look at the TV screen, the end result. It's almost like people, imagine a whole society of people who grew up watching movies, thinking that everything that they watch, all the movies, are actually real life. Like they spend 8 seasons watching Game of Thrones or something like that, or Breaking Bad. And nobody tells them in this society that this is all fake and that these are all actors. They believe that these are just some TV shows that were discovered from a lost civilization, let's say, that they're in the future, let's say. And they found this, and this was some lost civilization that was somehow magically filmed. And they think, oh, these people actually looked like this, and there were dragons, and there were zombies, and all this stuff. And there were all these beautiful people, and all this CGI stuff that was real. See? You see how twisted their worldview would be? So it's very important when you're watching Game of Thrones that in the back of your mind, you understand that this is an illusion. It's not real. Because if you think that Game of Thrones is real, that's going to really screw you up in life. Now, you would think that, well, Leo, this is such a ridiculous example that it would never happen in the real world. It could not possibly happen that people confuse illusion for reality like you're describing. This is an absurd example. This would never happen. But of course, it's happening right now. It's happening all over the world right now. Fox News is doing it. Cable news is doing it. Science is doing it. Religion is doing it. Politics, economics is doing it. There are so many ways in which this is happening. The problem is that when you confuse illusion for reality, when you make that critical mistake and you have no way of going meta and you're not even interested in going meta because what you think you have is reality. See, you don't know that. You don't know. The only way you could know what you're missing by not going meta is by going meta. You see, a Fox News viewer, for example, has no idea what they're missing by constantly only watching Fox News. The only way they could know is if they went meta and they started watching other news sources, questioning this stuff, questioning all news sources in general, questioning their worldview, questioning their conservatism, questioning their religious ideas and all that. Only if they question all that could they then look back and they say, oh my God, it literally was like I was hypnotized watching Game of Thrones thinking it was real. That became my reality. But I didn't know it because it seemed real. That's precisely what a really good illusion is. A good illusion is indistinguishable from reality. People forget that. When people hear the word illusion, they think, oh, well, illusion, that's some fakery. It's not real. I know what's real. And illusion is just, it's just some nonsense. It's so easy to tell what's illusory. But it's not, because this thing that you think is real, that is the illusion.